Okay, we're live on YouTube. Venerable Robina is here.
Hello.
Hello, Venerable.
Hello, darlings. Hello, everybody. All right. Good evening, Donna.
Good evening.
So, okay, let's talk. Let's keep looking. I've got a feeling, in spite of we'll talk about renunciation, but I've got a feeling we have to talk more about emptiness. We really didn't. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Is that okay, Donna?
Yes.
Good. We'll see what happens. Okay, so here we go. We're going to think about, those of us who already rely upon the Buddha, we're reiterating that reliance, just to remind us what we're doing in our life, you know. And the second two lines are stating this kind of really marvelous, altruistic, spacious purpose. The Tibetans call it a motivation. We call it a purpose. What's our purpose? Why are we together? To listen to these teachings, to listen to Buddha's views, see if there's something useful that we can use in our lives, help us develop our amazing potential so we can be of benefit to others. That's it. Sangye charang soke changnam la jancho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog Sangye charang soke changnam la jancho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog Sangye charan sote chognam la, jangcho badu dagni kyap suchi, dagi chonyen gipa sonam ki, drola penchir sangye drubha shog. Okay, so renunciation, we've already kind of talked about it. We mightn't have used the word much, but there's this one wonderful way of packaging all of Buddha's teachings. It's a variation of the lamrim. You know, the lamrim is Tsongkhapa's term, 14th century lineage Lama, our kind of patron saint. And he based his presentation of all the points of Buddha's philosophy, psychology, metaphysics, the works, the whole big deal, the big deal, the whole vast world view that actually Buddhism is. He used this little text of Atisha, this 11th century great scholar and yogi who came from India and spent the last 18, 15 or something years of his life in the 11th century. And he sort of presented the Buddha's teaching. That's all it is. He just took the essential components of the entirety of the worldview of all of the Buddha's vast body of knowledge, right? And presented it in a really simple way. He presented it experientially, instead of just being intellectual, to get the experience from it. But obviously, like anything you're learning, you present the knowledge incrementally, don't you? It's sort of obvious. We never think of spiritual teachings like this. It's still a surprise to us. Even if we've been Buddhists for years and years studying the lamrim, we don't quite get what it is. This kind of this weird package. We're not quite sure. But it's basically taking all the teachings in order. So what order? Well, it's obvious. In order of the capacity of the student. I mean, you're practicing music. They don't give you grade 12 first. It's pretty clear. They give you grade 1, for God's sake. So it's really evident, but we don't think of Dharma like that. We think of it all equal status. There's karma, there's mind, there's this, there's emptiness. We kind of think it's all just variations, but it's not flat knowledge. It's gradual, incremental. And it's so important to remember this. Then we know how to apply it in a day, you know. And that's why I use this silly analogy of junior school, high school, university, and postgraduate. It's actually profound because we hear those words. The second we hear them, we get it. If we say lamrim, even if we've been studying, even if we've been studying for 40 years, we don't quite get the meaning. Lamrim, yeah, okay. We don't get gradual. Even though the words say gradual, we still don't get it. But say it's a course. Oh, I get it. I see. Junior school, oh, I get that. High school, university, we know it's incremental. Straight away, you know. So another way of presenting, so okay, all the wings of the bird one, I love that, the wisdom and compassion. The wisdom is junior school and high school, the first two scopes of the lamrim. And that's all the teachings, that's the Hinayana teachings. So if you go to Burma or Thailand, that's what you'll learn. And then you stick emptiness in there and you'd graduate at high school because you want to achieve your own nirvana. Then you've got compassion wing, which is university. Then you've got the Vajrayana, which is unique to Tibet. It all came from India, but the only place where the Vajrayana, this esoteric level, the so-called postgraduate, as I call it, where that is extant and still existing, and as went on, is in Tibet. So Karma, the essence of junior school is karma. The essence of junior school is karma. The essence of high school is getting to the root of the problem and looking at the delusions and identifying them. The essence of the compassion wing clearly is compassion. And then you've got postgraduate, and emptiness comes into the final stages. So the three principal aspects of the path, as Tsongkhapa puts it, is a variation of the lamrim. So renunciation is the first one. That's what you get when you get to high school. That's what you get when you understood karma and the delusions, which are the two causes of suffering in the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, there are causes, you can get rid of it, and how to do it. The causes is the crucial thing. It's fundamentally necessary to understand this, because one way of framing all of Buddhist teachings is in terms of how to stop suffering and get happiness. So that's junior school and high school. That's the wisdom wing, essentially. And that's when, as I said, if you're going to graduate there, if you're in the Theravadan tradition, you'd add emptiness in there, because technically emptiness is a Theravadan teaching. It's in the Hinayana level. It's a high school teaching. It's not Mahayana in its nature. It's only presented in the Mahayana in the three principles, or in the lamrim, because it's combined with bodhichitta. It's called the perfection. If it's called a perfection, it's Mahayana, but it's a high school teaching. It's a Theravadan teaching. Because to achieve your own nirvana, you need to realize it. So clearly, it's where it belongs. So renunciation, we don't use it in daily life. I'm renouncing chocolate cake. It sounds so grand, doesn't it? We're giving it up. It's called giving up something. Giving it up. So clearly you want to give up what's horrible. You don't want to give up what's good. That's silly. So what are we giving up? We're giving up suffering and its causes. Guess what, Well, you've got to know what suffering is. You better know what its causes are. How can you give it up otherwise? So we've got to learn the Four Noble Truths. But as Lama Zopa said, when we misunderstand, because we hear Buddha sounds kind of heavy to us. He sounds kind of very fundamental. It's got to give up attachment and give up anger and give up this and give up that. We get a bit depressed. And if we don't hear it properly, as Lama Zopa says, we go, oh, we hear the Buddha says you've got to give up attachment. We go, oh, I've got to give up my heart. I've got to give up my happiness, because we're not clear about what he means by it, So we've got to be so clear. It means you have to study it. So when we hear renunciation, it sounds like you're losing something. But if we look very briefly at the kind of person you'd be, how would you be if you begun even intellectually and begun the work of giving up suffering and its causes? Well, you'd be a blissful, wonderful person. You'd be exactly the person you want. You've got further to go, but oh my goodness, you'd be an amazing human being. If you've understood karma to some degree, if you've understood what the causes of suffering are, and you've decided to stop doing those causes, it's pretty reasonable. You don't want a bellyache, you give up the causes. Well, the cause of future suffering is harming others now. Guess what? And then looking at your body and speech and beginning to work on your mind. That's it. It's very simple. So if you've begun to give up the causes of suffering, who's suffering? You're suffering. When? In the future. You don't want future suffering, because your mind will continue. You're the boss here, so you don't want to have future suffering. Like you don't want weeds in your garden in 20 years, so you pull them out now and stop planting them. Pretty clear. So how would you be if you can't control your body and speech, don't harm others, and then once you it's not just harming others that is where you create negative karma, but you get the idea. Buddha gets us to at least do the actions, as Lama Zopa says, immediate, urgent level of practice is give up harming others. Why? Because they're the heaviest of the negative actions. They're the heaviest, not the only ones. So then you start to kind of get point. Once you realize the Buddha says don't do actions that harm you, which includes killing, lying, stealing, and jumping on the wrong person, then you get the idea, okay, I better maybe stop eating so much cake and stop, and if I don't have a partner, if you don't have a partner, you're not breaking sexual misconduct, but you might jump on 27 people a day. It's okay if they're not your partner. I mean, if you're not having got a partner, you're not breaking a commitment, but you're just increasing your attachment. So you'll get the idea that you're trying to control your attachment. Because why? Because that's the cause of suffering. But in junior school, you can control the servants of attachment. You get to high school, and now you get to the mind. And start to unpack and unravel your mind. Start to distinguish between delusions and virtues, which is how we've been talking the whole time. So when you go to this, what kind of person would you be? I'll tell you. If you control your body, control your speech, and control attachment and anger and the rest, and you've harnessed the energy and you've got some semblance of practice, you would be very content, less neurotic, less up and down like a yo-yo, less depressed, less angry, less attached, less jealous, less low self-esteem, more content, more fulfilled, more joyful. Wow. And guess what? Also more compassionate. This is the point. But our trouble is when we hear the Buddha's teachings and we hear the way the Tibetans put it, it just sounds so fundamentalist. We can't hear it in the way that we understand it. It takes us a while to hear that it's not punitive, it's not blame, it's not beating you up. We hear it like that. It's so difficult, you know. When we get the point, wow, who wouldn't want to give up anger? Who wouldn't want to give up jealousy and depression and anxiety? Who wouldn't want to give up, you know, harming others? When we begin to understand it, well, it takes time because it's not our style, you know. So Lama Zopa says, you know, you've got renunciation when, this is so shocking, this really shows where we've got to go, a long way to go yet. He says, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive. It's like being in a septic tank. So he uses clearly these very graphic examples. Now, when we say those, we put those concepts together, giving up attachment, like being in a, you know, in a sewer. It's hard to compute that. What is he talking about? And that's because attachment is primordially deep, primordially subtly pervasive in our mind, you know. As Lama says, I can tell you about it for one whole year. We will never really begin to understand it until we first learn the definitions, the correct words, and then slowly doing the work internally. You can't push it, you know. It's like you can learn the theory of how to play Bach. You cannot force it and play it overnight. We know this. We know it takes years of practice. And every time you play it, you get a bit deeper. You get a bit deeper. That's all kinds of knowledge. We don't think that with the spiritual knowledge, but it's like that, you know. You've got to start somewhere. That's all. So renunciation. High school, wisdom wing, the beginnings of it. So then you got to go to the next one, these three principal aspects as Tsongkhapa talks them. The next one is this bodhichitta, this outrageous, over the top, incredible, like being a saint, basically. If you read the bodhichitta teachings, if you read about bodhisattvas, the simple equivalent is saints, you know, when we look at the Christian literature. It's the simplest, it's the best equivalent. You hear about St. Francis, you know, in the middle of all the, or whatever it was, who was the one in the middle of all the wild animals? Well, that was not just St. Francis, another beautiful monk. Who was that? When he was subdued all the animals, they all came and sat down at his feet. They thought he was going to get eaten, but they all came and sat at his feet. Who was that?
I thought that was St. Francis.
Was that St. Francis? I know he loved the animals.
Yeah.
So people like him, I mean, whether you're a Catholic or not, you love to read stories like this. We know that, you know. Many of the saints, maybe the ones who sit there and pray all day, we're not sure about them, but the wonderful ones who can't help people and, you know, look after people and sacrifice their lives, you know, we can't help but admire them. Well, that's what we call a saint. But in our world, you think about, certainly in our psychological world, you don't have a course to become a saint. I mean, you'd be called wacky, you know, but this is exactly what the bodhisattva path is. It's just that they're using Sanskrit words and they're using Tibetan words and another whole culture. So it's a different world, but the equivalent is there. There's no question. Of course, the understandings of it and the many different definitions. But in general, without looking at past and future lives, all this business, a person who's got some semblance of bodhicitta. No, actually, it's true. See, technically, that's not true. A person who's got, okay, I'll give you a good example. A person who's got, no, forget that. A person who's got some compassion and love, you'd say that's the equivalent. You can't argue. If you meet a saintly Muslim or a saintly materialist or a saintly, you know, Buddhist, they're going to be the same kind of people. Forget their philosophies. Forget whether they think they're going to go to heaven with God or forget whether they think they're going to be reincarnated. But if you look at the qualities, and that's the Dalai Lama's thing all the time, trying to find this common ground and look at what, as he calls it, secular ethics, which means good qualities, loving, kind, compassionate, wise, you know. Loving kind, especially here, the compassion wing. So, of course, the philosophical teachings are completely different. And I remember this vividly. I remember when I was in Kathmandu years ago, and a group of Lutherans had visited and they came to our center and they wanted to understand about Buddhism. So they asked all these questions just to see the differences, you know, between the Christian teachings and the Buddhist. So I was talking about bodhicitta, trying to explain how it was this, not just compassion, but on the basis of incredible compassion for all beings who are suffering deeply, the wish to continue to be reborn, life after life after life, never giving up becoming a Buddha because you wanted to help them. I remember this fellow, they were wonderful people. I remember this man, he said, oh no, that's so depressing. I do not want that. He said, I want to go to heaven with God. So there's clearly differences, you know. I'm not being rude about it. He thought it was the most awful idea. Thank you very much. I want to go to heaven with God. Thanks a lot, mate, you know. So it's really clear. The difference is obvious. The differences are really clearly different. And it's okay. It can be different. Nothing wrong with difference. I mean, we're sometimes a bit desperate to kind of make religion like Esperanto, but nobody ever speaks Esperanto, do they? Somebody tried hard one day to make a universal language, but it doesn't get used. So anyway, you know, the bodhisattva path, the bodhichitta, this Sanskrit word, I don't know why we don't translate it. When we do translate it, it sounds kind of boring. It literally means awakening thought. I mean, like, who cares, you know? So we've got to give it its own meaning, isn't it? And the implication is incredible love and compassion. This person having got renunciation first, which means recognizing their own suffering and the causes of their own suffering, which is the absolute basis. And then it becomes the basis of you having compassion for others. And I've used those examples all the time. When you know yourself well, you know your own suffering and its causes, then you have a profound compassion for everybody. But the bigger point here, clearly with the bodhicitta path, the bodhisattva path, this is where we do get into the bigger picture of endless past lives and endless future lives. It's a much different view. It's really obvious. I know that. But that's the Buddhist one, the bigger picture. So the bodhisattva is a person who, having realized their own suffering and wants to give it up, and then opens their eyes and realize we're all in the same boat. And even the wackos and the psychopaths and the crazies are also in the same boat. They've been the victims of the past life, and now they're the aggressors of this life, and they'll be the victims of the next life. We just keep changing roles, you know. So when you got that big picture, it brings a very different approach to life, doesn't it? Even if you can just conceptualize it. We've all had countless lives, and we all keep bumping into each other, harming and being harmed, helping and being helped, you know. So we're going to kind of break the cycle. So a bodhisattva is a person who's known their own suffering, really developed renunciation, become an amazing human being, and now developing compassion, unpacking and unraveling the mind, continuing to work on their mind. But realizing, oh my goodness, everybody's in the same boat. Everybody doesn't realize that they are the cause of their own happiness and the cause of their own suffering. They say that's one of the major reasons to have such compassion. You know, we're looking everywhere else for the causes, pointing fingers out there, you know, not realizing that we are the ones who have to transform our own minds. We are the ones who cause our own suffering and unhappiness. It's a very profound view, actually. So bodhisattvas, you know, when you've got that renunciation, then you develop this love, compassion, and we go through these various stages to get there, you know. And then it culminates in this incredible aspiration. You've made this paradigm shift now where only others are in the front of your mind. Now, from a psychological point of view in our culture, that sounds like mental illness, like you're demented, you know. We can't conceptualize a person who has no sense of a neurotic eye. But that's exactly what Buddha's saying we can accomplish. And all the methods are there. I mean, they're pretty intense. So this bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration based on incredible love, which is may everyone be happy. And not only that, but this powerful kind of like great love, even it's like a technical term. Not only may they all be happy, but it's my job to find ways to make them happy. And then compassion, which is empathy with their suffering. And not just that, but mahakaruna, great compassion. It's my job. They say it's like a bodhisattva is a person who's like a mother, and the entire universe is their children. They know perfectly well it's their job. Their job description is to help others. That's it. There's no sort of, oh, will I, won't I? It's just natural. You've got to that degree of incredible love and compassion. So, you know, it's an outrageous level of being, outrageous level of love and compassion. And then the second, so the first part of this bodhicitta is this powerful aspiration to, it's just natural now. You've completely realized it when you got bodhicitta, when it's real, that whoever you meet, they're your children. Of course you must take care. That ant, the dog, the pedophile, and you've got the wisdom to know how to help them. Compassion is not some sentimental thing. Compassion is based on powerful wisdom, and it can be very extremely powerful. Wisdom gives iron to compassion. You know how to benefit. Compassion is the wish to benefit, but on its own, it's just sentimental. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. You've got to have wisdom, which is you get that from removing the rubbish from your own mind. You remove the veils from your own mind, and you see others more clearly. So then you're qualified to help them. And you see their suffering. That's hard because we only have suffering for the innocent victims now. So we've really got to grow our minds in that way. And then the long-term goal of the bodhisattva is to never give up. However many lifetimes it takes, who cares? You're in for the long haul. You want to keep going every second, helping others, but growing yourself in the process until eventually you've perfected Buddhahood. You become a Buddha. And why? Because then you're perfectly qualified to know exactly how to help others. You know? And not just that, but this is where it sounds science fiction to us. When you've gone beyond all the usual laws of karma and the usual rules of the world, when you completely realize emptiness, which is the third one, we're getting there, emptiness, you've completely got bodhichitta and you've got this powerful renunciation, which is the basis, then you've got this extraordinary power, extraordinary wisdom. Your consciousness is not physical. You're no longer encumbered by all the rubbish. You're no longer confined by all the nonsense. You can manifest your mind in countless bodies throughout space. This is quite literally is what we're capable of. And bodhisattvas, the lowest level bodhisattva, once they realize emptiness, can manifest their mind in 100 bodies simultaneously. And you keep growing that capacity by the time you get to become a Buddha. Of course, this sounds like science fiction. But all the literature and all the methods are there, you know. So the three principles. And the third one is you've got to get wisdom. You've got to perfect your wisdom, which is realize emptiness, which we talked about yesterday. Didn't we, or the day before? Yesterday. Feels like about a month ago. Yesterday, wasn't it? Okay. And the thing is with these teachings, like anybody, see, again, we're not used to thinking like this in spiritual teachings. We think of them as just sort of fairly flat, and they're all kind of just a different component of a big path, but they're all connected. It's very obvious what you learn in junior school links to what you learn in high school, links to what you learn in university. Of course it does. Of course it does. It's obvious. All the pieces fit together. You know, you put all the pieces of the puzzle together. It becomes a completely integrated body of knowledge. It's very obvious. It's the same here, clear. So each one leads inexorably to the next level, you know, naturally. But like, it's really important to remember this, you know. That's why when we understand, because lots of people, like I say, sometimes lots of Westerners have big hearts and love the idea of compassion. When we hear about His Holiness talking, it's what he mainly emphasizes to the world. He doesn't go on about emptiness much, you know. He never talks about karma, not to the world. Public, in his text he does, of course, you know, it's all there. He goes on about compassion all the time. That's the common one. That's the one that connects with everybody. But when you understand more deeply how it's advanced, genuine compassion, you know, genuine compassion, based upon understanding karma, based upon understanding how everybody's causing them self-suffering, and how you need wisdom to know how to help. Compassion is the wish to help, but it's not the ability to do it. Often we make a mess now because it's polluted by our attachment, you know. We talked about that. So what's implied by all this path, especially the renunciation path, but it really takes us time to hear it, is it's actually what is informing it is incredible self-respect. But we hear it as punitive. We hear it as blame. We hear it as so heavy. It's very fascinating. And the reason is because of the misconceptions in our mind. We're so used to hearing things as blame and fault and, you know, that kind of thing. We hear it like that. We certainly hear religious teachings this way. Absolutely, you know. And because, of course, it's also because, of course, in our philosophical materialist views of the world, which even, you know, even if we're Christian or Buddhist or Muslim, we still really buy into those views. And I'm not criticizing, science is amazing. But, you know, as an actual body, as an actual philosophical view of the universe, it's got a long way to go before it finds answers. That's okay, nothing wrong with that. But that view and our psychological views and our neuroscientific views are completely based upon the view that someone else makes you, and therefore you're not responsible. Logically, if someone else plonks me on this planet, it's not my fault, is it? And we say that. We believe that. Well, that's the irony of ego, is we really do feel like innocent victims and things happen to us unfairly. And when good things happen, we don't care why, we just want them. So when we understand attachment and aversion, as I've been talking a lot, then we begin to see the misconceptions of ego and why we hear the Buddhist teachings is so punitive, why we hear karma so heavy. The first thing we hear is, when we hear about karma, is, oh, you mean it's my fault? It's terrifying to us, you know. That's why I always try to stress when we talk about karma, that it's the bigger picture, that everything we think and do and say, including all the good and the bad, produces our suffering and happiness. It's equal. Botany doesn't just refer to weeds, it refers to flowers. So we get used to that idea, and we can own all the good things and realize that we are the cause of those. Then it's easy to own the bad stuff. But ego wants to get off the hook. It's very profound, very deep inside us, that instinct. We're desperate to be innocent victims. It's very interesting, that. It sounds kind of cruel, but when we look inside, we'll see that, you know. So this idea of karma, it demands a real careful look, because the assumption about it is so profoundly different, you know. It's very fascinating. What did we talk about in the first day? What did we discuss, Donna? How many days? Is this our fourth day or third?
This is our fourth day.
So let's say what we talked about on the first day.
First day we talked about self-compassion
Oh, okay.
and compassion fatigue.
And then?
And then,
Tuesday? Remember?
oh yeah, hang on. I have to look at my notes. My brain is empty.
What I talked about could be another. I don't remember.
Thought transformation.
But we didn't discuss that. I know
We didn't really discuss it. No.
That's the bodhisattva path. I
Oh,
forget. Never mind. Did we talk about karma? I forget. Have we talked?
Yes,
We have,
we talked a lot about karma on the second day. Yes.
and we talked about emptiness yesterday, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
What's the topics for tomorrow and the next day?
Tomorrow is surviving a divided society in a political year.
Then
And Sunday is overcoming fear of upheaval and pandemic.
sounds like the same, doesn't it? Okay.
They're similar, I guess.
More of the same.
Venerable, I trust you to take it and go where you wish.
Okay.
Your wisdom.
Okay. Let's just look at a kind of, well, let's talk about what's called emptiness, but let's try and see it in a really down-to-earth way, try and see if we can taste it, you know, because when we hear all the philosophical stuff, of course it's advanced. Any body of knowledge at an advanced level is advanced by definition. Of course it is. So in other words, what would we be like if we had this, using their words, Buddhist words, when we've got this mistake in the mind, this deeply ingrained misconception called ego grasping, that it's the root mistake that causes all the other rubbish. So if we're overwhelmed by that, how would we be? This is the point. If we're overwhelmed by this ego grasping, as the Buddha calls it, which actually is this concrete, it gives rise to a very fear-based, concrete, solid, set in stone, separate, lonely, bereft me, but fear-based. Now, look at the world. Look at some people. You've got some people who are, you know, violent, aggressive, arrogant, harmful with their body and speech, abusive, harmful. Now, if you analyze that, you couldn't get an example of a person who's more disconnected from others, could you? I mean, they see the world as just like horrible and they beat it and kill it and rape it. I mean, that must be the most intense suffering. And we're trying to now remember this, don't see it as blame. What we're discussing here is not blame. We're looking at the way forget animals, the way human beings cause their own suffering. This is what we're trying to look at here, okay? So Buddha says, the root of our suffering is this ego grasping. So an extreme example of a person who's got very, very powerful ego grasping, which would mean they also have very powerful attachment and powerful anger and all the other dramas. So think of it at a volatile level of that kind of person. That'd be think about them. A harmer, a thief, a liar, an arrogant person who harms others. So if you think of that person, you couldn't wish for a better example of a person who's cut off, separate, you know, with a vivid, concrete sense of who they think they are, and that everything in the universe is like a threat to them. Think about that. Now, if that's not suffering, I don't know what is. But we see our trouble is with that. We're so addicted to blame. As soon as we hear about a bad person, we say, what do you mean they're suffering? We can't even conceptualize that. And what that proves is how disconnected we are from our own suffering. This is what's incredible. Forget the suffering of being punched in the nose, which is the first kind, the suffering of suffering. But we look at the second kind of suffering, which is really broadly the suffering of having attachment and anger and jealousy and pride and low self-esteem. When you're caught up in those, whether you're rich or famous or whatever, when that's the misery we're trying to talk about. That's the misery. So when, you know, but what happens is we hear about a person who harms another, and then you say, but that person's suffering, we just don't get that. We can't conceptualize that. We just think they're evil and they should be thrown into prison or thrown into hell. So, and this is where we've had this conversation, I'm sure, here and other places, several times, because we say, how can I have compassion for a bad person? We just can't get it. We can't conceptualize it because all we see is that they're mean and ugly and horrible and doing harm. And that's a fact. They are. They are mean, they are horrible, and they are doing harm. Fact. So how in the hell are they suffering, we will think. Well, guess what? The only way you will find out is by knowing your own mind. And we skip over that one. We have this hubris. Oh, I'm such, as if we're a perfect person. As if I'm a perfect person. And then we look at other people and we're endlessly criticizing, like as if we have no faults. That's the worst ignorance of ego. That we think we don't have faults because we don't look inside. So we might not go and rape and kill and torture. We might not. But check the last time you had an argument with somebody. Have you ever had an argument? Have you ever said mean words? Have you ever criticized a person? Have you ever had a fight? Everyone will say yes. Now, check how you felt. Check how you felt. It was unbearable, wasn't it? Well, that's called suffering. Good Lord. And we're so disconnected, we don't notice it. But that's what's called suffering. So why would you harm anybody? Not because you love them, not because you have compassion, not because you're patient, not because you're joyful. I mean, it's obviously not because of that. It's obvious because you're angry, depressed, jealous, and unhappy. Well, just look at the maniacs. It's just a question of degree, that's all. We're so disconnected from this, we can't see these things in ourselves. So if you don't know yourself, if you don't know your own attachment, your own anger, your own fears, your own depression, your own jealousy, how in the name of heaven can you possibly see other human beings? It's not possible, impossible. And that you could never have compassion for them. So only when you know your own mind, and that's the first stage, that's renunciation. When you know your own mind, the humility to own what's in yourself and realize this is what's breaking my heart. Then you can have compassion for the pedophile. Of course you would. It's immediately obvious. The person is a maniac. And then when you have the view of karma, you know why they're born with this tendency, because of habit. Habit, So the person is completely tortured. Check your own habit. We just keep wanting to jump on cakes, right? Look at our pathetic habit of eating too much cake. How little control we have. We can't even resist a piece of cake. Then you'll understand a pedophile. They just can't resist little girls, that's all. What's the difference? Of course, it's more harmful, but when you understand attachment and tendencies and habits, then we'll have a connection with sentient beings and we'll know why they do what they do, and then we'll have compassion. But it won't be sentimental compassion. It'll be tough love. Your heart breaks for that person, but you'll do everything to protect that person from harming others for their sake and the other's sake. That's proper compassion. But you will never have that until you know your own mind. Ever, ever, ever in a million years. Because the punitive view will take over. Look at that evil person. That's how we act, We just want to beat them up and kill them. It all comes from anger and blame. It's just so deluded. So renunciation is fundamentally necessary. You know yourself, and it demands incredible clarity, incredible authenticity, incredible honesty. Because guess what? We're all the same recipe. There's variations, that's all. And that's the Buddha's view about the mind. It doesn't even just apply to humans. It applies to every being in the universe, all the dogs, all the ants. The Buddhist model of the mind refers to all of us. And we have deluded states of mind and we have virtuous. And our saving grace is our virtue, I mean, one of my friends on death row in Kentucky, Mitch, he's a Buddhist. He's getting ready for his death date. He's a dear, dear good man. 30 years there, working on himself, being useful to others, dealt with his life, accepting reality, getting ready for his death date. I'm ready for that electric jolt, he said, And he told me one of the people. I know him. I've been going there 22 years, 23 years now. I know this guy. There's one other guy. Very relaxed looking. As Mitchell said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. Now, because we don't know our mind, we have never noticed how we think of eating cake all the time, of living in a sexual fantasy all the time, watching video games all the time, watching porn all the time, wanting to steal all the time. Look at our own messy minds, because we've got the habit from before and we can't stop it. That's what a habit is. We don't know why we've got the habit. Mummy didn't teach us. So can you imagine the pain of having that intense habit uncontrollably in the back of your mind day and night to want to torture? Why? From past habit. If you can't have compassion for that, then it means you don't know your own mind, even a fraction. But you see, we hide our stuff from ourselves. It's too painful to own it because we don't know why we're like we are. We don't know why we keep thinking about sex. We don't know why we keep thinking about eating food. We don't know why we have weird fantasies. We're terrified of it. Mummy didn't teach us, and there's no explanations in our culture. We don't know why people want to eat each other. We don't know why. We have no answers. We just think they're horrific and we should put them to hell. We want to ignore them, because we don't look at our own minds. So attachment to cake, attachment to porn, attachment to torture, it's the same thing. It's the habit. It's a habit, that's all. Of course, the quality is different, but can you imagine the torture? Forget the harm we do to other people. Forget the harm we do to other people when we do the dumb things we do. Forget that. The point is, in the renunciation part, we're trying to see our own mind and the harm we cause ourselves. We cannot skip this step. We won't have a basis for any compassion whatsoever. It'll just be artificial. It'll be all sentimental and gooey, And the Buddha's approach to knowing your own mind, we think we invented it with Mr. Freud 100 years ago. I mean, we're so arrogant in our culture, I can't tell you. This has been around for 3,000 years, this level of unpacking and unraveling the contents of your own mind. These genius Indians invented this approach, not us clever Westerners. It's unbelievable. The degree to which we can see our minds is totally brilliant, But it demands incredible courage to do it, incredible authenticity, to have an accurate view of your own mind. Then we can have compassion. Then it's easy. And you'll know what to do with them. You know how to help them, put them in prison, absolutely. Protect them from harming others, of course you would. We're so scared of all these things. We don't want to look at it because we don't understand why they're like it. We don't know why a person. We know very well this torturer man, in prison. We know his mummy did not teach him that. So that's why we're so confused. That's why our materialist model really hasn't begun to find answers yet. It's okay, nothing wrong. But the Buddhist view, at least as a theory, I mean, for me, it's about the best one I can come up with now. So far, a habit. You bring it with you, your habits. We can see how we're tortured by our own habits. Think of your pathetic habit to eat too much food. Think of it. Look how we were completely weak. We have no control, Look at us, just eating cake. I can't get over it. So it's so simple. Well, look at us, all feel so guilty. I've got so much attachment. I can't say no. I'm so lazy, blah, 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 So can you imagine if you're born? Like I remember reading about one of those serial killers, Jeffrey Dahmer, years and years and years ago. I remember reading an interview with him, And taking the Buddhist view, it was really interesting because I know, he was a weird guy. I mean, he had all this weird habit, as we'd call it, to want to skin people and had brains and had skulls in the fridge and would eat. I don't know what he did, all these weird things, right? Things that we find horrific. No explanation for it. But I remember hearing his interview. He had many nice qualities. He was quite a very honest man. He was very sincere. He was humble. We don't want to see that. We just want to paint with the one brush a monster, because we don't have a proper view. But I remember hearing him say how he was a tiny boy and he was compelled to torture little creatures. He said, I didn't know why. No one showed me. This is so profound, He didn't know why. His mother didn't teach him. In just the same way, as I use the example of the other little boy, friend of mine, son of a friend of mine, like 40 now, but he was 3. I always quote this story. The mother was taking the lice out of his head and he's crying with compassion for the lice. Well, she hadn't had time to teach him this yet. So where does it come from? It's in his mind from past, That's the karmic view. You bring your own habits with you. So if we have some good habits, we should be so blissed out. You mean you've practiced them in the past. The fact that we're even here in this room together thinking about how to become a better person is so stupendous. It should blow our minds, that we have the space in our mind to want to be a better human being. Whether you become a Buddhist, I don't care. Just that tendency is so astonishing on this suffering, crazy world, you know. But you know yourself, when you look at your attachment and look at the attachment to food, attachment to sex, attachment to laziness, attachment to whatever it might be, all of us, we've all got some tendency. We're all bone lazy and we want our comfort zone and we don't know where our crazy thoughts come from. I mean, I'm talking to people who can, you know, who confide in me, come to me, people in prison, people out of prison. We're terrified of what's in there, especially when they're weird thoughts like that. We're absolutely terrified of it. We don't know where it comes from. I mean, the torturer, he thinks of torture all the time. He knows perfectly well it's not valid. Luckily, I'm not happy he's on death row, but I'm luckily he's in prison around a bunch of friends who won't allow him to torture them. He's among friends. I'm so relieved for him. So we don't know our own minds. Forget compassion. I'm sorry. It's just too sentimental. It's too small. It's better than nothing. But the only way we're going to start to have real compassion, more profound compassion, is by having this incredible authenticity and courage to unpack and unravel our own minds and to want to be sick of suffering, to be sick of suffering, sick of the old habits, sick of the anxiety, sick of the stress, sick of the fears, sick of the anger, the depression, the worries, even just little words like this, you know, sick of it. Buddha's analysis is showing us how we can change. He's giving us methods because that is why we suffer. So then when you know that, you know why the pedophile is suffering. You know it. But of course you protect them from themselves, but, you know, and stop them from harming others. It's obvious. It's obvious you would do whatever you can to protect them from harming themselves and from others. It's obvious. It's obvious. But we don't like to have compassion for people who harm others. We just think they're evil because we don't know how to see our own minds. So we can't see theirs. That's why we're terrified of it. It freaks us out, you know. So we have so much fear, isn't it? So renunciation is absolutely is this area of working on our own mind we've been talking about. This is the basis. This is the start, you know. And you've got to see your own suffering. I mean, this is where when we understand the first noble truth that there are three kinds of suffering. The first kind is the suffering of suffering, when the bad things happen. And most of us in this room now, we're not in hospital dying of COVID-19, are we? Right now, we're not. We're not on the street. We're not in prison. Each of us here, we've got a home and a house and a mattress at least to sleep on. We're not dying of COVID-19 now, unless some of you are. I'm not sure. We've all got some kind of problem, it's true. But here we are, like, so fortunate. Why? Because we've worked on it ourselves and we've created the cause to have good, to be accessing our virtue, to have good situation. It's not just luck that we're like this, it's a result of our past virtue. Unbelievable. We should be so blissed out, you know, how fortunate we are. Then that gives us a space to start to see the suffering, which is the subtle level. We mightn't have the suffering of poverty or sickness, or being abused every day, but we've got the suffering of depression, the suffering of anxiety, the ordinary ones, day to day, that we don't pay attention to because we're feeling guilty. Oh, I'm not really suffering, we'll say. Of course we are. All in the same boat. It's a question of degree, that's all. So it's not being self-centered to look at your suffering, it's intelligence. And then to see what the causes are and then to try and find the solution. So you can become a more happy, wise person. Then you can become more compassionate, useful to others, you know. So let's go back to the emptiness one. Look at this ego grasping, this primordial root delusion that underpins every other rubbish thing we do. So think of a person, the maniacs, you know, the crazies, the pedophile, the harmer, the liar, the thief, the junkie, the rapist. I mean, the people who harm others. Think of that person. Then you look at your own mind and look at any time you've ever harmed anybody, any time you've had an argument, any time you've done something mean. You know perfectly well it's not because of love. It's not because of compassion. It's not because of kindness. It's not because of generosity. It's not because of forgiveness. It's because of attachment and fears and anger and depression and not fair and poor me. I mean, look at it. It's clear. So when you know that, when you know your level of neuroses, and why you harm others on the basis of those, then you just have to question it. It's just a question of degree to get to understand a pedophile or a rapist. I'm not joking here, but we just can't bear to. It's too terrifying. And why it's terrifying? You know why it's terrifying? To look at their minds, because we don't want to look at our own mind. We just want to live in la-la land, you know. I think we're so innocent and perfect and shove it all away because we can't bear it. We're so scared of what's inside us. Got to have courage to do this, I tell you. For your own sake first, then to have compassion on how to help others. So that's a consequence of ego grasping. So look, even yourself, when you've got just a little bit upset, a little bit anxious, a little bit depressed, look how, the crucial one is look how you're cut off from others. This is the key characteristic of ego grasping, is there's me and then there's others. This big separateness, you know. And look at loneliness, depression. When you're angry, anxious, depressed, low self-esteem, look at it. You're separate. The world is all out there, you know, and there's poor lonely me here. We know that experience. That's the function of ego grasping. That's the function of ego grasping. The sense of a separate me. Now, when you've got more love and more empathy, more compassion, more kindness, more generosity, more contentment, you are more connected to others, which means you mightn't be overtly thinking about emptiness, but that is an expression of the fact that you have a less rigid sense of a separate self. That's experientially how you can talk about the implication of understanding the theories of emptiness. It's just clear. When you're more miserable, more angry, more hurt, more depressed, more jealous, more crazy, more psychopathic, there's an absolute it's a question of degree, but a separateness. Just is caught up in this insane little kind of I-based world. There's no sense of connectedness to others, no sense of interdependence. But when you look at and this is just looking at not the wisdom wings or the compassion wing. And then when you're more kind, you're more connected. When you're more patient, you're more connected. When you're more loving, you're more connected. When you're more compassionate, you're more connected. There's a less vivid sense of this concrete self-pity me. The sense of a me kind of recedes into the background, and there's a sense of connectedness. There's a sense of we. These are the ways of describing the consequences of loosening the grip of this self-pity me, loosening the grip of ego grasping. It's really evident to us, and we will return. Okay, to really do the work, to rip out this delusion at the root, that's when you need to have single point of concentration, incredible renunciation, and single point of concentration, to really get down to the subtle level of your mind. We can unpack and unravel this primordial delusion, because it'll never go otherwise. You can be a nice person for a trillion eons. You will never cut the root of ego grasping. It's a good step forward. You can have bodhichitta, unbelievable, outrageous person if you're a bodhisattva, like a great saint, but you can even lose bodhichitta. You can lose bodhichitta, but you can never lose emptiness. So we need both, Every time you're more loving, it loosens the grip of ego grasping. Every time you work on ego grasping, it makes you connected to others. So each wing helps the other, but they've each got their specific techniques. You've got to apply both. Practicing bodhicitta will never get you to realize emptiness. Practicing emptiness will never get you to realize bodhicitta. You need both, but they're so utterly connected, utterly connected. When you understand that, you'll know what to practice every day, right? I need a drink, excuse me. So I think I have some questions now. Come on, ask me any kind of question you like. I don't mind. The questions are really good because it opens up all the things that people want to know about. So come on, ask me.
Well, there's a question from a student who's watching on YouTube.
Wonderful, darling. What is it?
Can you speak to the situation when the Buddha was a boat captain and killed the criminal who had planned to kill all the passengers? Where does compassion come in here?
I had to make noises and blow my nose, excuse me. Okay, that's a brilliant question. Thank you. Brilliant question. This is showing the most profound level of compassion, which is even more radical level than what we're describing here. Okay, but it's on that, it's an extension of that one, having compassion for the harmer. So, okay, it's a really great question. I think it's wonderful. There's this story, always a story, and there's various points about this story, one of the key points about this story is showing, if you talk at karma, how what we do, what determines the action we do, whether it's labeled negative or positive, which means what determines the seed that's planted in our mind when we do the action, which in turn determines our future experience. This is a really crucial point. What determines whether it's negative or positive is not even the action itself. It's the motivation that impels the action. Okay, so this is the first point. We can all see this. A simple example, Let's say Donna's rich, and I really want Donna's money. Of course, money is very seductive, So I treat Donna like she's my best friend. She thinks I really love her. I spend time with her. I call her up. I take her for dinner, but I don't really like her. I just want her money. I'm greedy. I mean, this is a really understandable thing. It's very seductive money. So I'm generous to her. She really thinks I love her. She really thinks I'm kind. And when I'm generous to her, she really thinks, she's, oh, wow, Robina's so kind. But look at my motivation. It is so clear. My motivation is completely not generosity. It is completely not kindness. That's a total possibility. So how can you possibly say I'm creating virtue when I give her $20 for her taxi? I'm not. As we call it, ulterior motive. I mean, it's a great term, Equally, Donna can have a little pussycat a little ant in her house. And like all of us, often in the West, we think killing the ant if it's suffering is compassion. So she can also do that. So we all know from the Buddhist point of view, generosity is called a good action and killing is called a bad action. It's very straightforward. But we can see an example of being generous that turns into negative karma because my motivation is lousy. And we can equally see that killing that ant out of compassion, which is what we think in the West, for Donna, she doesn't create much negative karma. She doesn't bother thinking about what the poor old ant happened once it's died. That's not the discussion. But what I'm getting at here is it's clear in each of those simple cases, a negative action can be motivated by a virtue and a positive action can be motivated by a delusion. So the person who does it, that determines the karma you create. As to whether you help the ant, that's another discussion. Okay, so this is an extreme example of it. There's this story, and they tell it in various ways, because a lot of these stories are kind of oral, so there are various ways they describe them over the centuries in the texts. But this particular story, one of the previous lives of the Buddha, when he was a great bodhisattva, not yet a Buddha, he was a captain of a boat or something, and there were 500 merchants. And because he's clairvoyant, so clairvoyance is not just some hippie trippy thinking that you're some Egyptian princess 42 lives ago, or get flashes of things. It's a very clear, stable, incredible, subtle level of cognition that you naturally get once you've accomplished single-pointed concentration. And you get stages of it as you go, because your mind is more subtle. At that level, your mind is beyond conceptual and beyond the sensory. So naturally, you've got this subtle level of cognition, which is much more powerful in its capacity for cognition. So that level of mind can cognize the past, cognize the future, and cognize minds. And as you keep increasing your spiritual power, you increase your clairvoyance. And as the Buddha points out, you really can't begin to help sentient beings until you've got clairvoyance. And this is kind of hippie weird for us, but this is completely in part of the whole deal. Completely there. All the techniques are there. People looking like you and me and have been for thousands of years up in the mountains right now getting single point of concentration. You really work hard to get in a couple of years, okay? So, okay. And there's many examples of this kind of story. The Buddha one is a great one, but I also told that story, I think, about Lama Yeshe helping the monk. So I'll tell you that story too. It's the same kind of thing. But the Buddha one is a really dramatic example. So, okay. Let me tell you the Lama Yeshe story first. It's the same kind of story. Having the wisdom, pure motivation, but the crucial point here in both of these stories, pure motivation, absolutely, but the crucial point, okay, in Donna's case, killing the ant, she really meant well, so she didn't create much negative karma, but there's no wisdom. Unless she's not clairvoyant. Let's just presume Donna's an ordinary person and she's not clairvoyant. She meant well, but she could not see the ant's mind. She had no sense of the karma of that ant. She had no wisdom whatsoever. And this is all of us. We don't have any clairvoyance whatsoever. We cannot possibly see the mind of that ant or our grandmother for that matter. We just mean well when we kill them. But as Lama Zopa says, meaning was not enough. You've got to have wisdom, baby. And the wisdom we're talking here is clairvoyance. That's the first point. And so then one is, if Donna from her own side had a good motivation, that's okay for Donna. But you need wisdom if you really want to know how to help the ant. So you've got to have the motivation plus the wisdom. And these examples of the Buddha and the story of Lama Yeshe are examples of this one. So Lama Yeshe's story, and I've told this many times, our friend Harry, an American who was helping one monk at Courtin Monastery in Kathmandu, Lama Zopa's monastery, Lama Yeshe's monastery. This is back in the late 70s, I think, or very early 80s, because Lama Yeshe passed away in 84. And there was a monk there, one of the Sherpas, who was very sick. And Harry was trying to help him. He'd found a doctor. Well, then he was very happy he'd found this doctor, and he told Lama Yeshe he'd found a doctor. But basically, Lama just said to Harry, listen, he dismissed it. He said, let it be. He doesn't need a doctor. He's okay. Well, Harry trusted Lama. Lama's his spiritual teacher, right? So then Harry was observing this monk was getting sicker and sicker, you know, and then he finally went up to the mountains to his family. He was a Sherpa, and he died. Now, that sounds like Lama Yeshe was really cruel. Not just good motivation, but really, really cruel. But Lama Lundrup, the abbot, explained to Harry, because of Lama's, his clairvoyance. This is the crucial piece here. This is the crucial piece. This is the first level of wisdom. The Buddha says we have had clairvoyance in countless lifetimes. We've had high realizations in countless lifetimes. We could even have had bodhichitta, but we've never realized emptiness. We've not cut the root of delusions, you know. We've been highly evolved spiritual practitioners. Clairvoyance for sure. We haven't gone all the way, so we lost the plot again. So with Lama having this clairvoyance, and you've got to realize that it literally means precisely what it says, that you've got this subtle level of mind that can see the mind of the monk, and in this case, see the karma the monk created. It's not just being clever, knowing was a, you know, the knowing he was a, but it's informing Lama's ability to know what's best for the monk. So Lama Lundrup, the abbot, explained to Harry, because of Lama's clairvoyance, he could see whatever the karmic action was, could have been 47 lifetimes ago. And you really, we're talking seriously here. He could see exactly the heavy negative karma that this monk created, which was causing his sickness. He could see clearly that if he had gotten a doctor, he would have gotten better and he would have had a really nice life. But he saw that didn't finish the karma. He wouldn't have finished this heavy karma, and next life would have been much, much worse suffering. So out of his incredible, first his clear recognition of that, his long-term wisdom, and his compassion, even though risking looking like he didn't care, he made this perfect decision. And in fact, the monk went up to the mountains, went to his family. He had a good death. And that means he cleared up the karma completely, and next life, fantastic. Now, that's wisdom and compassion. Donna just had compassion. Good for her. It's fine for her. It does not mean she helped the ant. And this is our big problem in our culture. We don't think there's such a thing as having wisdom to know how to help somebody. But this is the whole point here. We make a mess half the time, barging in, trying to help people, full of our own attachment and our own needs and our own neurosis, bullying people to do what we think they should do. That's why we make a mess in our relationships, because we have zero wisdom. Why? Because we have no renunciation. We're just full of attachment, full of our own dramas, full of our own anxiety, which pollutes our compassion. So wisdom is a profound meaning, you know, some hippie-trippy strange thing. Now the Buddha story, even more dramatic. Exactly the same scenario. Exactly, but this is for the point. This is more dramatic because it's for the sake of the harmer. So this story goes like this. He can see with his clairvoyance, one of these dudes, one of these merchants, wanted to kill everybody, the 499 other people, and take everything for himself. So the story goes that this person, the Buddha, the captain, had such unbelievable compassion for this crazy dude, from the countless eons of future suffering lives that he would have as a result of that heavy, heavy, heavy negative action. So he decided the only way to stop it is to kill this guy himself. Now, if you'd been there on that boat, I'm sorry, you would not have seen a person saying, hey, I'm a bodhisattva, I'm really a holy person. No, he wouldn't have had a halo. He would have looked like a heavy-duty dude who killed somebody. You would not have known his mind at all. But the purpose was this. As you know, Buddha asserts all the different realms of existence, hell realms and spirits, vast vast areas of suffering sentient beings, and the worst suffering are these hell beings as a result of intense negativity, intense rage, intense killing, the worst mental suffering. As Lama Yeshe says, hell is not this is the view of karma, not places where you're sent by anybody. There's no view like that. It's an incredible state of mental suffering with unbelievable pain and suffering created by sentient beings. You know, Lama Yeshe said one time, hell isn't some place where the devil is waiting, saying, ha ha, I'm waiting for Lama Yeshe. It's the outrageous suffering as a result of the negative energy of that sentient being. In this sense, as with karma, we all create our own experiences, life after life after life. So this Buddha, this person, had such compassion with this dude for the insane behavior, the insane negativity of killing everybody and taking everything. I mean, of course, he had compassion for the other 499, but the real compassion was for the crazy. The real compassion was the harmer, because he was just beginning, he would have been beginning countless future lives of unbelievable suffering. So he decided, best, I would rather have that suffering. I would rather have that suffering. I would rather go to the hell realms instead. That's the point. I would rather have that suffering instead. So he killed him happily for his sake. He wouldn't have known by looking at him. But the point is, because his motivation was so powerful, was unbelievable compassion, he would rather have the suffering himself. It was purely for this guy's sake. They say not only was there no negative karma, but he so purified his own mind that increased his ability to become a Buddha more quickly. Such level of unbelievable compassion. That's the explanation. So it's the ultimate in tonglen, isn't it? This amazing meditation, which is one of the powerful techniques in the more advanced stages of the bodhisattva path, which culminates in bodhicitta, where you do that practice tonglen. You know, and this is the advanced stages of compassion. And people in the West love this meditation. I'm always very amazed. Where you imagine, forget about a person who's going to go to the hell realms. You visualize just your friend with a headache. And you imagine, it's called tonglen, giving and taking. So when you breathe in, you visualize breathing in your friend's headache. I would rather have it than them. Just like that example. That's an outrageous level of compassion, you know, it's incredible. I would rather have a headache than them. One of my friends in prison, I can't tell you, it so moved me, is this maniac Mexican dude who's been in gangs all his life, killed several people on the streets, covered in tattoos, you know, crazy guy. I love the man. I've known him 25 years, 23 years. When I first heard about him, he used to write letters. My friend started writing letters after I met my first friends in prison, in this top security prison up in Pelican Bay, and right on the border of Oregon on the coast there. So all these heavy-duty Mexican dudes, you know, been in gangs all their life, where they used to kill men and rape women. Now I think women get killed as well, so it's equal opportunity. So anyway, I heard about Richie, my friend introduced me to Richie. So Richie used to write to me, and he told me he's a very laid back guy, but gets very angry. When he gets angry, he gets really angry, you know. So he's talking about how he was like that. So I went to visit one day and I met him for the first time, and there he was with the glass between us, and I was on the phone with him on the phone, you know, he's in top security, covered in his tattoos, completely covered in his tattoos. And he said to me, Robina, I had a fight with my cellie this morning. Cellie in California is your cellmate. And he said, Robina, I'm sorry, I had a fight with my cellie this morning, and I put his head down the toilet. But then he said, really innocently, he said, but Robina, I took it out again. I was so happy he hadn't killed the fourth person, you know. So I was so blissed out. And then he had the guy thrown out and did his Tara meditation, because these Latino guys love Tara, you know. Many wonderful stories. I'm sure Andre's got wonderful stories too, working with his friends in prison. So what I'm getting at is later on, years later, I still know him. He's still in prison, trying to get out now, because they're trying to release a lot of the guys in California. It's amazing. I'm so happy. So the thing was, he was telling me in his letter one day, he always gets very depressed. Very sweet man, but whatever. But he's very depressed. And he's in for life. He's, you know, for a couple of murders or whatever, didn't get death sentence. But he said, when my people, meaning the Mexicans, these young guys coming in, he says, my people, when they came in, and this young guy, I saw him, I had such compassion. He said, I really wished that I could have taken his sentence upon myself. I'm going to be here anyway, and that he could be released. Now that's an outrageous thought to have. That's an outrageous thought to have. That's tonglen. Even though he's already in prison himself, but to even think, this young Mexican guy, probably in another gang, I wished I could have taken on his sentence for myself and he could have been released. That's Absolutely mind-blowing, you know. It blew my mind, that. And even then he was diagnosed with kind of not AIDS, but his liver disease, or maybe getting on for AIDS or something. I can't remember, whatever, HIV, something, I can't remember. And he said, they'd be giving me medicine. He said, Robina, maybe it's better for me to not take the medicine and to get sick and to die. And then I can purify my negative karma. I mean, it was so sincere, you know. I mean, I thought, this is mind-blowing. The world sees him as a monster, but look at those thoughts. Unbelievable, you know. So tonglen, when you breathe in, you visualize your friend with a headache. And then you breathe in and imagining that you would rather have the headache than them. Now, the point is here, you're not trying to get a headache. Don't think that's the meaning. That's absurd. You're acting as if I could, I would rather have it. Meaning you're brave enough. Give it to me. I can handle it. You know, that's incredible thought. That's like putting atomic bombs on ego. And you imagine the person being free of the suffering. You'd rather have it. You can handle it. I've heard parents say that about their children. It's very amazing. You hear it. You know, I wish I could have the suffering instead of my child. People say that. That's this attitude. Completely reversing the usual view. You'd rather have the suffering. And that's a brave attitude. You're not thinking, oh, make me suffer. I want to suffer. I want to get a headache. No. It's putting atomic bombs on ego, putting atomic bombs on self-centeredness. It's unbelievable. And then when you breathe out, you visualize giving everything that you've got, all your merit, all your good qualities, all your wealth, all your health. You imagine blissful light and you give it to your friend, wanting to have them. You'd rather they be happy. So the point is like the Buddha's story, you know, because he said, I would rather have the suffering of the hell realms. But of course, the very fact that he said it, you can't possibly have that kind of suffering because that comes from delusions. They have another story about some yogi, some great yogi who was trying to have compassion, meditating, kept praying to go to the hell realms to help everybody. But then as he's dying, he's got, you know, as your mind gets more subtle when you die, you kind of can see your next life coming because your mind's more subtle. He could just see the God realms. He could see Pure Land. He was so upset he thought he was going to go to hell, but he was going to Pure Land instead. Because how could you possibly go to a lower realm, which is the result of negativity and fear and ego? Of course you can't. It's impossible. Of course, if you'd rather take upon a headache, you wouldn't get a headache. No way. Because that powerful mind, that cuts ego grasping and it gets bodhichitta. It's very powerful. That was a long answer, I think. Somebody asked me a question. That's the answer anyway. Any more questions?
Yes, Venerable. A student asks if you can talk a bit more about the techniques to practice emptiness and bodhicitta.
Well, you got into junior school and you have to control your body and control your speech, and then you don't kill and don't steal and don't lie, and then you take vows and you take refuge, and then you do your purification practice every day. That's junior school ground. Then you go to high school and you start to look into your mind, you identify all your delusions, you identify what's there, you take responsibility, you identify your virtues, and you work on your mind. You become your own therapist. That gets you renunciation. Now you go to the bodhisattva wing and you continue to practice, and you practice all the different techniques, starting with equanimity to go to this, and love and great love and compassion, great compassion, tonglen, and it culminates in bodhicitta. There's all the practices there, you know. It's orderly, structured, incremental. And then you go to the bodhisattva path and you continue your practices on the bodhisattva path, and then you get concentration, and then you hear all the teachings about emptiness, and then you realize emptiness. I mean, all the teachings, in other words, I'm just trying to say, are all laid out in this lamrim, all structured, all laid out in this kind of big course where you graduate as a Buddha. And when we understand experientially, like I'm saying here, the energy of each of the levels of practice, and we begin to understand the practices. But they're all there. The techniques are all there in the literature. They're quite precise and quite technical and quite detailed. That's my big answer. No quick fix answer. We might talk more about emptiness before we finish the class. We've got another hour to go yet, haven't we?
Yes.
Any more questions, darling?
Yes, Jay has a hand up to ask a question.
Good, darling. Go speak to me.
This is something I've pondered for 40 years, which is...
Well done, Jay. I've got to see you first. Where are you? I can't see you.
I don't have a camera.
Oh, okay. No, I can see your camera. I can see your thing down the corner here, Jay. Okay, good.
You know me from 2014, Atisha, the Tara.
Oh, good.
Dented.
Oh,
Okay?
well done. Good on you. Okay, go, Jay.
All right. Now, I struggle with the Buddha having had a family and just left.
Oh, really? Jay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know it's in the
okay,
back of my mind. I feel like it's an uncool question.
I understand. No, it's a wonderful question, Jay. Let's analyze it. So let's ask the whole question, and I'll try and answer.
Well, the question I have is, I struggled with, why didn't he just finish off his householder life and then, go off to the forest?
I
in
understand.
that tradition?
Okay. All right. Okay. Can you imagine any situation? Let's say you're a mum and a wife, okay, and you've decided to become a surgeon. Let's just say that's possibility. It's possibility, isn't it? Would you agree with that, Jay? Put your mute back on.
Yes.
You'd agree that's a possibility. We'll take levels of this, not just take the ultimate, we'll take a level of it. Can you imagine? And you really can see, you look around the world and you see there's so much suffering and you feel, I just can't be, I'm happy to be a mother and I want to be a wife and I want to be, or daddy, whatever you are. I really want to do that, but I see there's so much more good I can do in the world. And I'm going to take some time out of my day every day. And, I'll make sure my kids are happy. I'll make sure my hubby still loves me, but I'm going to start working on being a surgeon. Can you see how that's possible or not?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
We'll just extend it a bit more, darling. It's so simple. It's not complicated.
Okay.
It's just extend it. I mean, if you think about what a Buddha is, okay, whether you think about what a Buddha is, I don't know, but you're saying you're hearing this stuff for a while. If you really understood what a Buddha is a person who's able to manifest their mind in a billion forms without universes to benefit billions of sentient beings. That's kind of a big doctor. Would you not agree? And as he said to his family, they wanted to come with him. They were all sort of wanted to renounce as well. He said, no, don't you worry. I'll help you later. So he went back and helped later. He just went off for a few years, became a Buddha, and then helped them. So if you've got the bigger picture, you can even imagine that. I think even you can imagine going off for a month and have to have an intensive medical retreat so you can pass your exams and your family would understand. It's a question of level. Now, if you just go off being selfish, then I completely agree with you. You've got to know what even the benefit of being a doctor, not to mention the benefit of being a Buddha. It's a question of degree. I think you can imagine that.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
Do you understand my point?
I do.
Good. Yeah. You sure? Don't take it so easily. Argue with me.
Well, I'm close to always agreeing with you, my darling.
You're not where you are. You're not. You're not agreeing with me. And I mean, don't, Jay, but try and say some more. I mean, it was clearly a very powerful point for you. I can't imagine my answer made you happy immediately. So discuss it.
I think, Robina, what it is, it has to do, as I asked that question to you, I realized that it has to do with my own unfinished family problems from when I was a kid.
There you go, darling.
I felt deserted.
There you go, sweetheart. So that's a really interesting point that you see that, Jay, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's really a very powerful point for you to look at. That's amazing insight, sweetheart. And that's what you got to heal yourself, because the fact is you might have been rejected and it might not have been a virtuous motivation. Do you think they're whatever the scenario is, do you think their motivation was a virtuous one or was it a selfish one? What's your feeling?
I know both my parents really well. They were alcoholics, and I have empathy for them.
Okay,
indeed.
so now I understand. Their motivation was totally suffering, totally their own self, because they were utterly suffering and distraught and depressed and miserable. That's completely different discussion, and it's understandable you feel that way. So that's so powerful. You really got to look at this and heal that thing, and then eventually. I mean, then that's a really interesting point you made. That's amazing. Well done, Jay.
Okay.
Just
Thank you, my darling.
Keep going, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks, sweetheart.
You inspire me.
I'm happy about that. Good, darling. Good. Okay, someone else, please. That's wonderful. Thank you, Jay. It's very good. Someone else.
Yes, Venerable. Susie asks, how would a being lose bodhicitta?
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
Are those who have achieved bodhicitta still under the influence of past karma?
No, yes, because you haven't realized emptiness. Until you've cut the root of ego grasping, until you've cut this misconception that causes us to not see reality, that's what perpetuates lifetimes. Even bodhicitta, I don't know quite exactly what level of bodhicitta before you lose it, but that's a possibility because you haven't cut until you've got the ego grasping cut, there's still a sense of compassion for inherent you coming from compassion from inherent me. There's still this distinction of dualism, and that's what perpetuates samsara. So even, the reason to say that is just to show how necessary it is to get the wisdom side down. But the wisdom on its own, not enough. Compassion on its own, not enough. And that's why this whole way they present the path, they're integrated together. You can't avoid doing them together, you know. So necessary. Do you understand, darling? Go, Susie, yeah?
Yes. Would that person not have full clairvoyance then? They haven't gotten up to a level where they would understand about their past karma?
That's not really the issue, though. I mean, they say Shariputra, Buddha's disciple, he lost bodhicitta. He gave it up.
After we heard about the Heart Sutra and everything, or before?
No, darling, I think just the point is to try and, I mean, you got to study it well to understand the implications of all of this. But the real point is to show that until we have cut the root of ego grasping, you will not escape from samsara. That's the point.
I understand that. And that
point. But that's
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think as a Westerner, I try to beat everything to death. I want all these little details.
But we need the details.
Big picture.
But we do need it. We need both, exactly, Susie. And that's why we have to study it to get the. But the real point there is how we have to cut the root.
Thank you.
That's the implication of that. The details, I can't even tell you what level, what details. That's all there. But that's the real point to get from this, you know?
Okay.
Thank you, Susie. Wonderful. Anyone else, please? Questions?
Yes, the student asks if this is a couple of sentences here. If karma is based on intention, how do you help people who are violent and angry all the time? Even if you stop them from physically acting out their thoughts, they have already had the thought.
No, it's true. But when we realize there are different levels of creating karma, that's why the first level of practice is to control the body and speech. That because it's not a complete action, it's just the mind. It's not a complete action. And this is the point, you see. If we look at the world now, and we can see suffering, forget lower realms, all right? But look at the world and look at the intensity of the suffering people have, and it's called experiences. The kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause, which if you look at the universe, we're all very social beings. All the animals are social, the creatures, the ants, the bugs, the humans, we all interact with other sentient beings, don't we? Now, we can see, forget the environmental suffering, but just the suffering we experience at the hands of others. Usually our friends and our family. It's not strangers who harm you by definition. Well, it can be sometimes. That's called experiences similar to the cause. So why you get killed is not because you've had a thought to kill, it's because you've killed in the past. Why you get lied to is because you've lied in the past. Why you get stolen from is because you've stolen in the past. Why you get raped is because you've harmed with your body in the past. So the obvious heavy duty level of suffering, which is being harmed by others, you stop that by stopping harming others with your body and speech. Then you've got the luxury to start looking at your mind and get to the root of the problem. So this is why behavior is unbelievable. If you think of the whole world, if we understood that if we controlled our behavior, which is body and speech, the world would be blissful. Then we've got the luxury to work on the delusions to get to the root of the problem. You got to go one step at a time, you know. That's the reason. So clear. So of course you can, that's why you prevent your dog or your crazy cat from killing all the mice. Absolutely, you can't change the mouse's mind, the cat's mind, that's clear. But you can, out of compassion, you help your cat not kill mice. You help your crazy alcoholic child not harm others. That's why I'm saying my friend on death row, the crazy who thinks of torture all the time, I'm not happy he's on death row, but at least he's in a protected environment among people who love him, who he's not harming anybody, he doesn't have a chance. So how fortunate, I'm so happy for him. His poor mind is still crazy. Oh my God, but behavior is so huge. Help animals not harm, help humans not harm. Their mind is their business, I agree with you. But at least you prevent the heaviest negative karma they create. That's the understanding about compassion for others, you know. Hope that answer is clear. Who else? What else? More questions?
Yes, Venerable. Zach has his hand up, and after Zach, Rebecca has a question.
Okay, Zach, talk to me, Zach. Where are you, sweetheart?
Hey, so I have a question about lamrim and how we practice the individual stages on the path. Specifically, that I understand that but the bodhisattva path comes after the Hinayana path of renunciation.
The renunciation path. That's right, Sam.
And but then I know, like at least in Tsongkhapa's exposition, that he has single-pointed concentration after bodhicitta.
That's right, exactly.
So are we supposed to be like, is it useful to develop single-pointed concentration or work on that while we develop, before we develop renunciation, before we develop bodhicitta, or should we just focus on the renunciation?
No, exactly. I understand. So I think the point that I think is very interesting is that he's by that, it's just my own interpretation, he's showing, you got the Hinayana path, and let's say you're just only practicing, you're in Burma or Thailand. You're absolutely, but your first step, and that's prerequisites on that path, you cannot possibly get single point of concentration, go to the mountains, unless you've given up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, unless you've got some serious renunciation life, given up sex, rock and roll, living in vows, because there's no way in the universe you're qualified to go to the mountains to get serious single point of concentration if you haven't controlled your body and speech. That's really clear. Do you understand? If you read the lamrim, Tsongkhapa, you see all the prerequisites just to get to the mountains. So I mean, it's really already super advanced just to have enough renunciation. And also in the, as you know, in the Tsongkhapa path, that implies that you can go earlier. Of course you can. That implies maybe you've done some work in the past life and you're more qualified. I mean, many of our Western friends, for example, one friend of ours, Venerable Robina, a Swiss monk. The first time he met the lamas, late 70s, same time as me, he immediately went on the meditation path, but he became a monk. He lived in the monastery. He'd go off and on and do retreats. But he said to me when I interviewed him in 1995, about one of his 2 year, I think, I forget now, 2 year or 1 year, single point of concentration meditation retreats in Spain at our lovely center there, Ling, beautiful place up in the mountains, so perfect environment. And he's doing single point of concentration. He said there was no way he could have been qualified to go and get single point of concentration meditation in a serious environment, not just doing it 10 minutes a day, a serious environment, unless he'd been a monk and living in vows, unless he'd done lots of purification, which he'd already done, without having listened to lots of teachings, and even without having given teachings. They were the qualities that enabled him to even want to go to the mountain. So in a way, you can't leap to the mountain sooner. You've got to have so much. And of course, bodhicitta being such a powerful motivation, such an incredibly powerful motivation. All of that was informing his wish, but he began that path almost from the beginning, but it was continually mixed with all the other practices. Do you understand?
Yeah, so even if you're practicing single point of concentration, you eventually will reach a level where without renunciation, you cannot develop even.
By definition, utterly. You think about it. Even think about that. What renunciation means is what lack of renunciation is. You're overwhelmed by ordinary attachment. You need to sleep. Yes. You need food. You need this. You need that. Your mind is so distressed you can't think of anything else. Imagine trying to get concentration. I mean, just to get to the mountains, to have. Look at the pabonka, the prerequisites. You've got to have completely given up any interest in this life. Can you imagine if you're thinking about sex all the time or food? I mean, it's literally impossible. Literally impossible. So by definition, you need powerful renunciation to even begin to seriously get. I mean, we can practice every day. There's never a doubt about that. Let's start today where we're at. But to do a serious job of going to the mountains, it's just not possible without the underpinnings of all the vows and the heart, and the practice and the purification.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
That makes sense why he put it there too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
No, exactly. So that's right. Exactly. Because it's kind of interesting because it's actually a high school teaching. It's a terror. Yeah. I mean, even concentration is not even a Buddhist teaching. It's a Hindu teaching. Mm-hmm. But if you're on the Theravadan path, that's exactly what you do. You get your renunciation first, and then you get your concentration, and then you get your wisdom. But here, the bodhisattva path is said to be a very powerful. The motivation to really get it is what is the stupendousness of the bodhisattva path. And then it's taught as the final stages of the bodhisattva perfections, in your day-to-day life, you're bopping around doing all the generosity, patience, perseverance, and the other one. And then and your meditation, you're doing the last two. Of course, you can get concentration sooner. It depends on the karma of the person, really does.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it.
Good. Okay, Zach. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Who else? Put your unmute, Donna.
Sorry, Rebecca was next.
Good, Rebecca. Go, sweetheart. Talk to me.
Hi, Venerable Robina. Happy Sakadawa.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm kind of stuck on emptiness at the moment, and we read the Golden Light Sutra today with the center for Sakadawa, and in chapter 17, there's something that I think I'm often totally misinterpret things, so I want to see if I'm on the right track. That there was something that kind of reinforced. Would it be correct to say that the law of karma proves emptiness?
Of course it does. Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I'll tell you why. You know, when you look into dependent arising, and this Buddha classically teaches 3 levels of dependent arising, which are the direct arguments with the 3 different levels of positions that were prevailing at the time in the Hindu positions. He diverged in his own direction. Now, the very first one is the very first level of dependent arising is that everything comes into existence in dependence upon causes. Well, guess what? Karma is that I mean, look at the view now of ego grasping. I didn't ask to get born. Someone else made me. It's all not my fault. Poor me. And attachment and anger. Look at us. We're locked into that. But when you start to hear about karma and that you created your own life and you are in charge, this completely heals ego grasping. It's a profound example of the first level of dependent arising that can completely smash ego grasping. It can completely help you heal your mind and become more grown up and more mature. Absolutely. It's a perfect example of dependent arising. And it's not even directly related to emptiness because it's an argument with subtle impermanence, but it's a perfect example, the first level of dependent arising, which is causes and conditions. Absolutely. That's the point. Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, darling. What's next?
Alfred asks, what's the difference between the realization of emptiness in higher school and university? Because emptiness looks like one thing that is realized, but it sounds like the emptiness to be realized is different in the middling scope and great scope.
Well, there's different Buddhist, I mean, when you study in the monasteries, you study the Buddhist text, and we do it in the centers as well. You study Buddhist tenets, which is a presentation of all the different schools, first 4 major schools of thought in the Buddhism itself. There are many different views, many interpretations of emptiness, right? This is the point. So you've got the Hinayana level, and then for Theravada, which is the one that's existing today, is one of the remaining 18 sub-schools of the Hinayana level. I forget which one. There's 2 levels of those. And then you've got the Mahayana, and there's the Chaitanya, that's divided into the Mahayana, the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika, the middle way. And then middle way is divided into 2. There's all these different, very detailed presentation of these variations of interpretations of emptiness. So absolutely there are different levels of interpretation. There definitely are, you know. I mean, that all the way. And so the one that's said to be the one that's the expression of Buddha's actual intent is called the consequentialist middle way, the prasangika middle way. So one of the key radical differences in that view, which is said to be the actual meaning of emptiness, is all the other schools of thought, all the way through to even the highest levels of the Mahayana, the middle way, before you get to the prasangika middle way, is that there's got to be something there in the person. There's got to be something there that is the actual referent object for the label I. So only the Prasangika Madhyamika is the most radical view, where it said there's not one atom of anything within the aggregates that is the I. So there's very many, yes, indeed, many different interpretations of emptiness. You're absolutely right. Okay. Who else?
George asks, could you speak more about how the mind of a bodhisattva can inhabit more than one body at a time? What
Sounds pretty cosmic, doesn't it?
What you mentioned is being like science fiction.
No, exactly. It just sounds beyond insanity. I agree with you. Absolutely demented, you know. I think the only way to, I mean, it's taught in the sutra teachings, but I just find that it's the Vajrayana teachings that seem to be such a simple but marvelous description, explanation. This helps us understand karma. It helps us understand all these things. Let me just try and describe to the best of my ability and try and see if you can deduce from this explanation how it's a possibility. Okay, so the Vajrayana would say that the universe consists of minds, billions and trillions of continuities of consciousnesses, billions and trillions of sentient beings, mind possessors, ants, humans, animals, gods, hells. There's a whole spectrum of possibility of trillions of sentient beings. They're all beginningless and they're all endless. Humans like a miniature percentage, okay? So now, all those minds, which are not physical by definition, are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. Because there's two phenomena in the universe. Speaking simply, there's consciousnesses and then there's matter. There's minds and there's matter. And the matter, this is how we used to think in our culture a while ago, it's made of the four elements. And there's these detailed descriptions in all the Buddhist literature. And indeed, the Tibetan medical system is based on this. You study it for like 13 years, 15 years, you know, the intricacy of all the subtle different elements and the interreaction and the relationship with each other. But the fundamental point that the Vajrayana says is that all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. Okay. So as Lama Zopa says, in the Kalachakra Tantra, there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Internal refers to mind. External is the physical. So here, this bag of bones is the gross consciousness and it's gross body, and it inextricably linked with our gross sensory consciousness. You can't separate eyeballs, which is physical, from eye consciousness, which is not physical. They interdependently exist. They're separate, but they're interdependently existing. Then you've got subtle consciousness, which is really only the time we experience that when we dream. But the great yogis can access that. And we've got the subtle physical energy intimately connected to that subtle consciousness. So we've got the 72,000 subtle channels coursing through our body. And then through all these channels are coursing all these different subtle wind energies, the different prana wind energies, the Ayurvedic system, the Tibetan medical system, the Chinese system. That's similarity in their understanding. And so then all our states of mind, or our mental consciousnesses, our anger, our love, our compassion, all the thousands of conceptual stories that we exist in at this level of mental consciousness are inextricably linked to all their wind energies. So as Lama Zopa says, when you're angry, when your mind is angry, forget your speech or your actions, but just your mind, angry thoughts, that immediately pollutes the wind energies that your anger is connected to inextricably. Your Tibetan doctor will feel your pulses and she can feel the different imbalances of the wind energies. And she knows that's related to your attachment. That's how come you got anxiety. That's related to your anger. That's related to, it's a super integrated system that even the greatest Tibetan doctors, they're clairvoyant. They can see exactly the karma you created. Because everything we think and do and say, like Lama Zopa says, that anger in the mind pollutes those wind energies. And that's what eventually causes you to have sickness, eventually in future lifetimes. And then even in this life, then eventually even more long term, that impacts upon the external elements, because we all live in environments, don't we? We don't live in the sky. Everybody has an environment, and even the physical environment is impacted by that. So your internal energy impacts upon the internal winds, which in turn creates the karma, creates the cause to have future suffering in the body you get, and even in turn impacts upon the external energy, which causes the imbalance of the physical elements like fire and all the imbalance and the suffering of the earthquakes and whatever. All of this is created by the mind. Every tiny bit of the entire universe is all coming from mental actions, karma. That's the meaning. So we're all locked into this scenario now and going from one realm to the next, to the next, to the next, locked into it because of ego grasping and because of attachment and anger and the other 83,999 ridiculous mental neuroses that we've all got for eons, Buddha says. All these misconceptions, these conceptual stories, these are what create these realms of existence. So hell beings, a hell environment. So if we've got the four elements, think about this, got the four elements. So there can be a mind due to lots of virtue that gets reborn as like a god, which is what's called heaven. Your body, your mind is blissfully clear and good because that's the fruit of virtue. Enormous joy and bliss is the karmic result of virtue, naturally. So naturally you're pure because you've been virtuous. That purifies your wind energies. It cleans them up. It heals you. And the next life you'll be born with a subtle light body and your mind is conjoined with a subtle light body. And clearly you've got a subtle light body. Your mind's pretty blissful. So that's a God realm. It's a real existence. It's a real existence, but you're still in samsara. Then further down the spectrum, you've got human, then you've got the animals, the pretas and the hell beings, all of them with a certain level of mental consciousness with the result of their past actions and their certain level of physicality, which is the result of their past actions. So we create all of this. So we are locked into samsara, and this will just inexorably keep happening, life after life after life after life, and still we start changing the delusions, and and until we cut the root delusion, cut the biggest lie of all that believes in this self-existent, real solid, real this, real hell, real human, real that. So when you realize emptiness, and then you add bodhicitta to this, then you can do what you damn well like with the elements of the universe. You can manifest your mind in a billion forms when you're a Buddha, because you completely are beyond the normal law of stupid karma. You're now in charge of the universe. Your mind is as vast as space. Right now, our mind is stuck in this ridiculous body. We can't see past our own nose. We don't remember 99% of today. Forget about a past life, for God's sake, because we're so deluded. Our minds are so gross. But as you purify your mind, as you progress, it expands literally until eventually all delusions are gone. You've got complete wisdom that sees the universe. You have complete wisdom that sees the mind of every living being. You're a Buddha by now. And you've got this subtle wind energy connected to your mind. You can do what you like with it. You can manifest in millions of bodies. You can manifest universes. You're in control of the universe now. I don't know if that helps. That's my answer. Food for thought. What can I say? I mean, it's hardly, anyway, whatever. It's logical deduction based upon this system, And the way to understand that is to understand delusions and how they confine us in this miserable pinhead, big sense of concrete, absolute this. That's the delusion. When that's gone, you're like a magician. You can do what you like, You can manipulate matter to your heart's desire. Now that you asked the question, I'll tell you a lovely story. I always tell this story. I like it. It's a good example of a Buddha. As we all know, if you've been around Tibetan Buddhism, you all hear that the Dalai Lama is a Buddha, okay? I wouldn't know. He looks like a gorgeous person to me, and I've known him around for a while. I just think he's great. How the hell would I know he's a Buddha? I'm not clairvoyant. But, I'm prepared to have confidence he is. Good enough. But anybody who worth their salt in this system, they all say he's a Buddha. Okay, so we'll take that on face value for now. Let's just say he is a Buddha. Let's think about this. Let's say he is a Buddha. What does that mean? It means there's consciousness. Think about this. There's absolute Buddha and there's relative Buddha. When you're fully developed, when you completely have enlightened your mind, when you have gone beyond all delusions, when you've completely rid the mind of delusions, you've realized emptiness, you've perfected all that, you've got bodhicitta, then you finally achieve Buddhahood. Your consciousness can only be pervading wherever there is existence. It is not possible for it to be anything else because it's no longer encumbered by delusions. Why our mind is stuck in this body of ours is because of eons of delusions, because we're living at a very gross level. But our mind is not physical. So as you progress in your spiritual practice, it literally expands. And eventually you're a Buddha. It can only be wherever there is existence. Your consciousness literally pervades the universe. How could it not? Now that's actual Buddha. They don't need stupid bags of bones. But why have they become a Buddha? Because of unbelievable compassion for suffering sentient beings. So then they manifest in bodies. There's the Buddha's mind, and then there's the bodies the Buddha manifests in. And there's two kinds. One is the one that peanuts like you and me can see, like Mr. Shakyamuni Buddha, the prince of 2,500 years ago. He had a human body. But a body doesn't need a body. So then the other level of body they manifest in is a subtle light body, which the great Arya bodhisattvas who've realized emptiness, the Arya bodhisattvas can cognize in their meditation. So that's also to help, the higher beings. So there's two levels of bodies the Buddhas manifest in. And but even the lowest level bodhisattva, already before they're Buddha, can manifest in 100 forms. And as you progress, it gets to when you eventually can manifest in countless, throughout countless universes, for the sake of countless sentient beings, for countless eons. That's what you're capable of, because you've gone beyond all the rubbish. So, okay. Dalai Lama said to be one of them. I would not know. But put it this way, it's a human body he's got. So if he is a Buddha, it means he's chosen consciously to take that body for the sake of sentient beings. But if he is a Buddha, that's just one of his countless bodies. And at this moment in time, if he is a Buddha, he is spontaneously and simultaneously manifesting in countless bodies throughout countless universes right now, in all the hells, all the gods, all the humans, countless universes simultaneously and spontaneously with no choice, because now you only want to help sentient beings. I know it sounds like science fiction. This is all in the literature. It's all there and it fits. This model is coherent. It's up to you to study it. I'm just telling you some things, what a little bit that I know, you know. I haven't proven it yet, just conceptual knowledge. So anyway, if he is the Buddha, that means he's been manifesting the whole time. So Lama Zopa told this lovely story. I've told the story many times. I'm sure you've heard it before. He told us back in the 70s, I heard it. He said, at the time of the 60s, early 60s, when the Tibetans had come into exile, right? And the Dalai Lama and all the great lamas were so, the urgent need was to get land to build monasteries so they could carry on the lineages, and before all the lineages died out, before the knowledge died out, because it's an oral lineage, you've got to have real knowledge holders. So they were desperate to get land. So they were negotiating with the Indian government, who was so kind to the Tibetans. You know, I mean, they were a poor country, and they were negotiating to get these hundreds of thousands of acres, just forest, down right down south, near Bilik, down in beyond that town down there, I can't think of it. But whereas in fact now it's like little Tibet, hundreds of monasteries, communities of Tibetans live down there. It's very incredible. But they were negotiating with the Indian government to get this to happen. And there were lots of obstacles, you know. So that the Dalai Lama's minister come down from Dharamsala. It was like a 12-hour journey by car or by train, you know, down from up in the hills, down to the plains in Delhi, where the government is placed. And he tried to get a meeting with the Indian minister, and he got frustrated and couldn't get a meeting. So he went back up to Dharamsala all upset and disappointed. And Dalai Lama just basically said to him, it's okay, it'll be okay, you go back down to Delhi right now. So he did. So that day he had a meeting. There was the Indian minister's little boy was in the office with his daddy. So he was chatting to the Tibetan. And the little boy expressed the wish for a dog. Well, I mean, the Tibetan was delighted to grease the wheels. I'll get you a dog, you know. So he went outside, and there was this sadhu, you know, this Indian holy man, with his little dog. Can I buy your dog? Yes. So he bought the dog and he gave it to the little boy, and the little boy was over the moon, and he went to his daddy, and daddy's happy, everything works. You know, the meetings happen and it starts moving forward, this big project. So as Lama Zopa said, the sadhu and the dog were manifestations of the Dalai Lama's mind. So in other words, what the Buddhas, you know, they're going around, they're constantly facilitating. That's what they're doing. They're facilitating things. They're not just walking around looking like a monk or having a halo. That's why the Tibetans have a wonderful saying, you don't know who anybody is, so don't judge. You know, all these outrageous stories of crazy people and butchers and maniacs. They're actually wrathful Buddhas, you know. So really, it's another whole look of the universe, I promise. And this is a Mahayana path. It's not, forget Tantra, just the Mahayana path's outrageous enough. Of people bopping around trying, you know, developing bodhichitta, becoming a Buddha, and benefiting sentient beings in all kinds of interesting ways. Wrathful as well as everything else, you know. So that's the way that they say the Buddhas would manifest. And he didn't need to have been born in the womb of a mummy dog, and he wouldn't have had to have been born in the womb of a sadhu. They can just manifest like that. That's their capability, the Buddhas. And that's what they're doing all the time, helping sentient beings. I mean, I can't say it's true yet. I haven't got clairvoyance, okay? I'm just studying this stuff, taking it as my working hypothesis. So I'm presenting it. If you don't believe me, just look into it. Okay, that's the story. 1:45. What else?
Margaret asks in a couple sentences here, so am I to understand that the definition of emptiness is the elimination of ego grasping? I think I have a block against the word emptiness. I just can't seem to understand it.
Were you here yesterday? Was she here yesterday? We'll maybe spend a bit more talking about emptiness.
I think so. Margaret, were you here? You can unmute and speak.
Yes, I've been here.
Okay, good, darlings. Let's just talk a bit more. Okay. I know it's a trouble. As soon as we hear the word emptiness, we get very kind of nihilistic and very peculiar. But it's like anything. It's you know, in any body of knowledge, they've got their own language, haven't they? If you start hearing two computer scientists talking, you wouldn't have a clue in hell what they were talking about because you haven't learned the language. So of course, all I can do is use the language, but we have to learn the language, Margaret. It's very obvious, you know, and it takes time, darling. So the word emptiness, like we talked yesterday, began a bit. We'll just discuss a bit more now. It's just shorthand, Margaret. It's shorthand for this fact that Buddha has found that within Margaret, there is no independent little mini Margaret in there running the show. Speaking very colloquially, darling. So all that is, Buddha's saying, no, Margaret, in spite of what you feel, and we all feel it, there is no little mini me Margaret in there. speaking really simply, honey. So he calls there is no mini me, Margaret, the absence of mini me, Margaret, the absence of it. And we've got to cognize that absence. And that's all emptiness. It's referring to the absence of that fantasy I. And when you've realized emptiness, quote unquote, in subtle meditation, the penny will drop one day and you will see nakedly and clearly for the first time that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that fantasy, Margaret.
That makes perfect sense.
Well, there you go. I'm so happy.
It's taken me a long time to learn that. Thank you.
And emptiness is just shorthand for that absence. And we've got to see that absence.
Right.
You understand my point? We've got to recognize it. Because it's just, yeah, that's right. That's the point, darling. So just
Yeah, it makes sense.
Good.
Thank you.
There you go, Margaret. Very happy. What else, people? That was quick. 3 minutes.
One other question. Do you have to have single-minded concentration to fully realize emptiness?
Hell yes. That's it. Not possible without it. Okay. Unless you've come into this life with it already, then it's clear, you know. Like that's a lovely story about Lama Zopa. I tell these same stories all the time. So I'm going to tell you this story now. But it's always worth hearing again. Lama Zopa, you know, he was a Sherpa, and he was recognized as a little boy as the reincarnation of the previous Lama, called the Laudo Lama, a yogi who kind of, you know, there's a little hole in the wall up there. There's a little hole in the wall up in the mountains up there in Sherpa, above Namche Bazaar, where, you know, all these yogis meditate up there. So there's one little hole in the wall where they used to store radishes or onions. I never know which one. And so he moved them out towards the end of his life, moved out the radishes and moved in, you know. So he got known as the Radish Lama or the Onion Lama. I can't remember which one. It's Laudo. It means radish or Lama. So he spent the last 20, 30 years of his life there, this great yogi, Kunsang Yeshe. And then he died, and as a great yogi, he died in control, completely knowing who he was, realizing emptiness, going through the stages, meditated at the time of death, and got realizations. So then, you know, then he chose his new rebirth. They're in control of their lives. They can, you know, they can organize their future rebirths. They know exactly where they're going. So anyway, this little boy got born. He wasn't called Zopa then, but we'll call him Zopa. And his sister said from the time he was tiny, he always acted kind of different, you know. He sort of like acted sort of, he would sit on boxes, he'd eat his meals on his own. Whenever he played games, he would always play the role of a lama. He'd make mudpie dojis and mudpie bells and mudpie tormas, and he would always announce that all his benefactors would come to the puja, and he'd mention all these lists of his past life benefactors. So mummy sort of decided she better check with the local lamas who he is. And also when he was very tiny, as soon as mummy turned her back, little Zopa's gone, crawling up the hill to where they know the Laudo Lama's cave is. And every time he was always going up there, you know. And from the time he could walk and talk, there he was, walking up the hill. Come home, his mother would say. No, he'd say, that is my home. So she checked with the local lamas. He was recognized, you know, in the divinations as the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. So then he was thrown off to the monastery or whatever happens. You know, they chuck him out. Don't chuck him out. I'm just joking. But he tells this story when he's about 8. I've told the story many times. I'm sorry if you're bored by it, but it's a lovely story. So he was about 8 years old. Would have been about 1952 or something like that. And there's this big river. They're very, very torrential rivers up there, really intense, and this rickety bridge, and on the other side of the water there was these weird looking people. He'd never seen these people before. They had pale colored eyes, straw colored hair. Clearly it was white people. He'd never met white people before, and he wanted to meet them. So anyway, he took his bowl of potatoes, because you can't go empty handed, you know, the Sherpa's staple, they're potatoes, and he went across this rickety bridge and he fell in. Of course they don't teach him swimming up there, so he's drowning. And this is how he told the story. He said the head kept coming to the surface for air, and he could see his manager running along the bank, freaking out, you know, he's the monk. The head, not my head, the head. Then he said, the thought occurred to me. The person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, meaning that he hadn't learned it in that life. Because if you realize it, you can never lose it, ever. Not possible. So we can deduce from that behavior that he had in his mind already, had realized, Margaret, the absence of that fantasy I. And once you've done that, you've cut the root of all You've got more to know. You've got more work to do, but you cannot go back after that. That's that paradigm shift we absolutely have to make. That's when this major shift occurs. And from that second, you're crawling, you're getting out of your samsara into your nirvana. Lots more work to do, no question. But it's a major point we have to reach. So he said, and I told you, that's right. He said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. So several points about this. I always mention this. This is the point about ego grasping, Margaret. When you've realized that when you see nakedly, with absolute certainty, the absence of that fantasy, Margaret, that we've all believed in since the beginning of this time, that it couldn't exist, doesn't, and never has. It's a very radical absence. You understand what I'm saying? A really profound absence. When you've realized that, you've cut all fears, because fear is the character of all the neuroses. Fear is, we live in fear all the time. We've got this low level sense of nothing's ever right, nothing's ever good enough, always anxious. That's why we stand up every 5 minutes, have a cup of tea, then we'll change our body, then we'll go here, then we'll go to sleep, and we stand up, we sit down. We're never satisfied. The fact that we can't go to the mountain and get single point of concentration is because we are junkies of attachment. Because we are never satisfied. The mind is always stressed, always anxious, always worried at some level or other, unless we've got stupendous levels of virtue, But still, if we haven't realized emptiness, it's always going to be there. So when you've cut the root, and of course he would have been practicing more than just that, he would not have ego grasping. He would not have a separate sense of me. He would not have attachment or anger or jealousy or pride or neurosis or distress. He just can't have. It's not possible. You've burned the seeds. So he would have therefore no fear. Because the way they use fear in the Tibet, in the Buddhist psychology, it's just that pervasive sense of nothing ever being enough, never being good enough, never right, always something wrong. Fear is our natural taste, So that would not be there, impossible. So it's interesting, Mr. Darwin, I think, wasn't it, who assessed by looking at animals and humans that we need this primordial instinct for survival. When we're attacked, we need it to survive. Well, don't be ridiculous. Buddha says you need intelligence. He didn't have fear. So we would think if he didn't have fear, he'd sink to the bottom of the river like a stone, going, oh, well, I'm drowning. What does it matter? No, he still came to the surface for air. You would have seen a little boy gasping for air. But the point is, his mind would have been crystal clear, as if he's walking on a peaceful street on a peaceful day. That's insane for us. But that's what we can accomplish. And that's what comes from the realization of emptiness. That's just one example. I love that story. All right. Slowly, people. It doesn't come overnight. It's gradual. Like everything is gradual. You get and this is the point. As you begin to lessen your crazy behavior, killing, shooting, raping, torturing, eating too much cake, alcohol, videos, whatever. Go at your own pace. You steady already your control and your speech. Oh my God, your speech. You shut your mouth. Already subduing your mind. Then you start to look at your mind and you begin to unpack and unravel and you begin to subdue that. Already becoming more blissful, less fearful, less neurotic, less up and down. It's gradual. Then you get to compassion and bodhichitta. You become insanely courageous, insanely joyful, insanely fearless. Then you realize emptiness. Then you really become fearless. And then you finally become a Buddha. I mean, it's a progress. It's gradual, incremental, one step at a time, okay? Something to look forward to. I can't wait. Okay, people, time to go home. A bit early, but it doesn't matter. All right, Donna, is that okay? Any more questions? No more questions, Donna? No.
No.
Why don't we let's just do a bit of Mahamudra meditation. Just watch our minds, okay? This is from Lama Yeshe's book. We might discuss that over the weekend. I'll go into Lama Yeshe's wonderful book, Mahamudra, in the weekend. I might do that. It's very delicious. It's a particular method to realize emptiness, particular method by meditating on the nature of your mind to help realize emptiness. It's a wonderful technique. And we'll discuss it the weekend. I think it's very lovely. So we just do there's two components. There's this classic, the two kinds of meditation, concentration meditation and insight meditation, concentration meditation and insight meditation. So concentration meditation is the first technique where you try to get single point of concentration. And then on the basis of that, you then develop insight into emptiness, insight into how things exist. And of course, there's many methods of doing that. So let's just, but the usual one we know one technique that's very common, and Buddha taught it, is we use the breath as the focal point of our concentration. But here in the Mahamudra technique, The two kinds of meditation are working, but the first one, you don't focus on your breath. You focus on the mind. So clearly this is more advanced than we're probably ready for, because we don't know our mind. And if you get get very excited about it and go crazy, we don't know what we're doing, but we can try, you know. So the object of concentration is actually called the clarity of your mind, which means the non-physicality of it. It's quite subtle, but most of us, just the mind is kind of berserk. But don't worry about it. Don't get upset about it. One of our commonest problems is I tried to meditate, but my mind is crazy. Well, of course it's crazy. What do you think? So this meditation, you just get yourselves comfy first. Just get yourselves comfy. I'll just mention briefly the way to sit. The classic position the great yogis over the centuries have found to be most conducive to good meditation. So if you're sitting cross-legged, fine. If not, we'll keep it simple. There's not much time. We'll discuss it more in the weekend, I promise. So you just have your back upright. Don't slump into your chair. Don't lean into your chair, okay? Sit upright. Have your feet firmly on the ground and sit upright. That's important. It helps all the subtler energies and the mind flow more smoothly. Have your hands in your lap as you wish. You know, if you know the mudra or the gesture, or just relax in your lap. Don't worry. We'll go into more detail on the weekend. Then your head slightly forward. That's important. Chin tucked in a bit. The jaw relaxed, lips apart. And the tip of the tongue resting lightly behind the top teeth, just near the palate. And all the great yogis over the centuries have found that this stops you from dribbling. It's very practical, okay? Nothing holy about it. And your eyes looking down beneath your eyelids, as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground. So settle into this position in a very relaxed, unself-conscious way, okay? Because your body doesn't meditate, your mind does. So now, for about 3 minutes, we're going to simply make a decision. I'm going to pay attention to whatever pops up in my mind. You don't conjure any thoughts. You don't have a thought. You don't analyze the thoughts. You don't discuss with the thoughts. You don't wish they weren't there. You don't wish they were there. You're just going to watch with determination not to be distracted, not to space out. You're simply going to pay attention. And often you start to pay attention, you think, oh, where are my thoughts? You get very confused. Don't worry about it. Just with strong determination, pay attention to whatever pops up in your mind. That's the meditation for like 3 quality minutes. Okay. Just keep your attention sharp, just on your thoughts, whatever they might be. Just your mind. Very focused. Okay, relax now. About 3 quality minutes. It's really good. Better to have 3 quality minutes than 10 minutes of spacing out, I promise. It's okay. You finish. Let's finish again with the, I like this, just to we think these marvelous aspirations of the bodhisattva, the 4 immeasurable thoughts. It's the brave attitude of the bodhisattva that it's my job. If I don't do it, who will? This courageous attitude. So we just think, okay, how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could abide in equanimity, free of attachment, ignorance, and anger. May they abide so. I will make this happen. Please, Buddha, please, Lord Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could be free of suffering and its causes. May they be free. I will make this happen. Please, Lord Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings could have happiness and its causes. May they have them. I will make this happen. Please, Lord Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were never parted from higher rebirths and liberation's excellent bliss. May they never be parted. I will make this happen. Please, Lord Buddha, bless me to be able to do this. And we dedicate this 2 hours, all these thoughts we've had. If you think about it, as many thoughts there have been, as many moments as there have been, is as many seeds we planted. So we had this rich 2 hours of amazing gardening. How marvelous. So we think we're going to nourish these seeds from this second with our practice of understanding wisdom, of understanding our own suffering, having compassion for others, really developing our marvelous qualities so we can help others, never stopping, one step at a time, So that all these seeds eventually will ripen in the development of our own perfection later as a Buddha. How marvelous. And may bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration to benefit others, may it grow and grow in the hearts of all. Kewadi nyudu dudang lama sangye drogyune drowa chikyang malupa dei sala gopasho Jang Chob Sem Chog Rinpoche Ma Kye Panam Ke Gyuchik Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pavasho. See, tell me tomorrow, maybe.
Yes.
But if you die, you die with a happy mind. Don't worry about it. Just done so much good work. go to a blissful new, or go to Buddha, go to Pure Land or the pure human rebirth. Don't worry about it. Nothing to worry about. Just keep going, okay? Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Thank you,
Bye,
Venerable.
sweethearts.
Thank
Bye.
you, Venerable Robina.
Bye,
Bye,
Robina.
darling.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, sweethearts. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, Donna.